He raised his glass and toasted to my failure, literally, in front of my parents, our kids, his boss, and everyone else I ever shared a table with. And they laughed. Every last one of them. But just wait. Wait until you hear what happened when he walked to the front door later that night. And froze. My name is Isabel Monroe, and I'm 44 years old. I live in the coastal town of Elmbrook, where the salt air clings to everything and secrets have a way of washing ashore when you least expect them. I work as a freelance editor, and I'm the mother of 2 children, though that number would change in ways I never imagined. The night that changed everything started at Romano's, the kind of upscale restaurant where the wine list costs more than most people's grocery budget. My husband Philip had reserved the private dining room to celebrate our 15th wedding anniversary. I should have known something was wrong when he insisted on inviting everyone we knew. My sister Margaret, my best friend Harriet, his business partner James, even the neighbors. Anniversary dinners are supposed to be intimate, not performance pieces. I wore the blue dress Philip had bought me for Christmas, the one that made me feel almost beautiful again. Almost. 15 years of marriage has a way of dimming your shine, especially when your husband has spent the better part of the last 5 treating you like a fascinating specimen he's grown tired of studying. The evening began pleasantly enough. Everyone complimented the restaurant, the food, my dress. Philip was charming, the way he always was in public, making jokes, asking about everyone's lives, playing the perfect host. I actually started to relax, thinking maybe he was trying to rekindle something between us. Then came the toasts. My sister went first, raising her glass with a sweet speech about love and commitment. Harriet followed with something touching about friendship and finding your soulmate. James cracked a few jokes about marriage being like a business partnership, except you can't fire your partner. Finally, Philip stood up. He was smiling, but there was something in his eyes I couldn't quite read, something cold and calculating. "I'd like to toast my wife," he began, his voice carrying that smooth confidence that had first attracted me all those years ago. 15 years with the only woman who can turn a kitchen into a war zone. A few people chuckled nervously. I smiled, thinking it was just his usual gentle teasing. "Not everyone has the courage to endure someone like Isabel," he continued, his smile never wavering. "She's special. The kind of special that keeps you on your toes. The kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew about yourself." The laughter grew louder. My sister was practically cackling. Even my own children were grinning. I felt my face grow hot, but I kept smiling, the way I'd learned to do over the years. Keep smiling, keep quiet, keep peace. "So here's to Isabel." Philip raised his glass higher. "Who taught me that sometimes the biggest surprises come from the people closest to you. And trust me, she's full of surprises." The whole room erupted in applause and laughter. Everyone clinked glasses and drank, while I sat there feeling like I'd been turned inside out for their entertainment. The worst part wasn't the humiliation. It was how easily everyone joined in, how quickly they were willing to laugh at my expense for the sake of a good joke. I excused myself to the bathroom, where I stared at my reflection in the gilt-framed mirror. My face looked hollow, my eyes tired. When had I become someone it was so easy to mock? When had I stopped mattering enough to defend? I couldn't go back to that table. I couldn't sit through dessert and coffee and more jokes at my expense. So I did something I'd never done before in 15 years of marriage. I left. I walked out of that restaurant and into the rain, leaving my purse, my coat, and my dignity behind. My feet carried me to my mother's house, though she'd been dead for 3 years. I still had the key, and the utilities were still on because I couldn't bear to sell it yet. I sat in her old kitchen, in the dark, drinking cheap wine from a coffee mug and trying to understand how my life had become so small. The rain pelted against the windows, and I thought about all the times over the past few years when Philip had made me feel less than. The subtle put-downs disguised as jokes, the way he'd correct me in front of other people, the sighs and eye rolls when I spoke. When had I stopped fighting back? When had I accepted that this was what I deserved? I thought about my children, Sophie, 19 and away at college, and Marcus, 17, and so absorbed in his own teenage drama that he barely noticed his parents anymore. They'd laughed tonight, too. My own children had laughed at their father's cruel jokes about me. What did that say about the woman I'd become? What did it say about the mother I'd been? The wine was making me maudlin, but I didn't care. I poured another mug and let myself sink into the misery. Tomorrow I'd have to face them all again. Tomorrow I'd have to pretend tonight hadn't happened, that it was all just good fun, that I was overreacting. But tonight, in my mother's kitchen, I could admit the truth. I was dying inside. I had been for years, dying so slowly I hadn't even noticed until I was already a ghost of who I used to be. I must have fallen asleep in the chair, because I woke to the sound of someone knocking on the front door. The rain had stopped, and pale morning light was filtering through the curtains. My neck ached from sleeping upright, and my mouth tasted like regret and cheap wine. The knocking continued, persistent but not aggressive. I considered ignoring it, but something made me get up and look through the peephole. A young man stood on the porch, maybe 25 or 26, with dark hair and nervous energy. He was holding an envelope and kept glancing at a piece of paper in his other hand. I opened the door but kept the chain latched. "Yes? Are you Isabel Monroe?" His voice was soft, uncertain. "Who's asking?" He held up the envelope. "My name is Eli. Eli Whitmore, I think. I think I'm your son." The world tilted. I grabbed the door frame to keep from falling, my heart hammering against my ribs. "What did you say?" "I'm sorry to just show up like this. I've been looking for you for months. My adoptive mother, she passed away last year, and in her things I found this." He held out the envelope. Through the gap in the door, I could see my name written on it in faded ink. My maiden name, Isabel Hayes. I had to sit down, right there on the floor behind the door. I sat down hard and put my head between my knees, because I knew exactly what that envelope contained, and I knew exactly who this young man was. 27 years ago, when I was 17 and stupid and so in love I thought my heart would burst, I had gotten pregnant. The father was Thomas Whitmore, a boy from the wrong side of town who worked at the marina and wrote poetry in a notebook he kept hidden in his back pocket. My mother had been horrified, not just by the pregnancy, but by the boy who'd caused it. "That family is trash," she'd said. "You will not ruin your life for trash." She'd made me promise to never tell anyone who the father was. She'd arranged for me to stay with her sister in Portland for the last few months of the pregnancy, and she'd arranged for the adoption. A nice Catholic couple who couldn't have children of their own. I never even held the baby. They took him away before I could look at him properly, before I could memorize his face. "It's better this way," my mother had said. "Clean break. He'll have a good life, and you can move on with yours." But you never move on from something like that. You carry it with you forever. A hollow place in your chest that never quite stops aching. I thought about that baby every single day for 27 years. I wondered what he looked like, what he was good at, whether he was happy. I wondered if he thought about me too. "Ma'am?" The voice through the door was concerned. "Are you okay?" I struggled to my feet and unlatched the chain. When I opened the door fully, I nearly cried. He looked so much like Thomas, it was startling. The same dark hair, the same green eyes, the same crooked smile, but he was taller, broader, more filled out than Thomas had been at 17. "I'm sorry," I whispered. I need to sit down." He followed me into the living room, where I collapsed onto my mother's old couch. He sat carefully on the edge of the coffee table, facing me. "I don't want to upset you," he said, "but I had to know. My whole life, I felt like there was something missing. My adoptive parents were wonderful, don't get me wrong, but I always wondered about my birth mother, about why she gave me up, about whether she ever thought about me. Every day," I said without thinking. "I thought about you every single day." His face crumpled a little. "Really? Really? I was 17. And my mother? She said it was the only choice, that you'd have a better life with people who could give you things I couldn't. I wanted to keep you so badly, it felt like dying. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us crying quietly. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. This is them. My parents, Rose and Michael Whitmore. They died in a car accident when I was 23, but they were good people. They loved me. I looked at the picture of a smiling couple holding a baby. My baby. They gave you his name. Whitmore. They knew about my birth father, Rose told me before she died. She said his name was Thomas, and that he was a good boy who got mixed up with the wrong crowd. She said you were just kids who made a mistake, but that it wasn't really a mistake because it gave them me. I smiled through my tears. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. She also left me this. He handed me the envelope. She said to only open it if I ever decided to look for you. And to only look for you if I was prepared for any answer I might get. Inside the envelope was a letter in my mother's handwriting, along with a birth certificate and some medical records. The letter was brief. To whom it may concern. This child is the son of Isabel Hayes and Thomas Whitmore. He was born on March 15, 1997, at Portland General Hospital. His mother was 17 years old and unable to care for him. She loved him very much and gave him up in hopes he would have a better life. If you are reading this, please know that she never stopped thinking of him. Signed, Margaret Hayes. My mother wrote this. I stared at the letter in shock. She never told me she left anything for you. The adoption agency gave it to Rose and Michael. Rose said she always planned to give it to me when I was older. But then life got in the way. She forgot about it until she was going through her papers before she died. I looked at this young man, my son, and felt 27 years of grief and regret and love crash over me like a wave. I'm so sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry I couldn't keep you. Don't be sorry, he said firmly. I had a good life. I have a good life. I'm a teacher now. Elementary school, I love kids. Maybe because I always wondered what it would have been like if things had been different. We talked for hours. He told me about his childhood, his adoptive parents, his job. I told him about my life, about his half-siblings, about the years I'd spent wondering if I'd made the right choice. It was strange and wonderful and heartbreaking all at once. Finally, as the sun was setting, he stood to leave. I should go. This is a lot to process. Will I see you again? I asked, hating how desperate I sounded. I'd like that. If you want to. I mean, I don't want to disrupt your life. You're not disrupting anything, I said. You're completing something I didn't even know was incomplete. He smiled, that crooked smile that was so much like his father's, and hugged me goodbye. It was the first time I'd held my son, and I didn't want to let go. After he left, I sat in the gathering darkness and thought about what this meant. Philip didn't know about Eli. No one did, except my mother, and she was dead. I'd kept that secret for 27 years, burying it so deep I'd almost convinced myself it hadn't happened. But now Eli was here, real and solid and undeniably mine, and I had to decide what to do about it. I thought about the toast Philip had made, the way he'd humiliated me in front of everyone we knew. I thought about the years of small cruelties, the way he'd chipped away at my confidence until I'd become someone I didn't recognize. I thought about how he'd made me feel like I was lucky to be tolerated, like I should be grateful for his attention, even when it was cruel. But I wasn't that person anymore. Looking at Eli, talking to him, remembering who I'd been before I'd learned to make myself small, it had awakened something in me I'd thought was dead. I was somebody's mother. I was somebody's first love. I was somebody who mattered. The next morning, I went home. Philip was at work, the kids were at school, and the house felt like a museum of my former life. I looked at the family photos on the mantel, the careful arrangements of furniture, the life I'd built that felt suddenly fragile and temporary. I called Harriet and asked her to meet me for coffee. She came immediately, probably expecting me to apologize for leaving the restaurant or to explain my behavior. Instead, I told her about Eli. Jesus, Isabel, she said when I finished. You've been carrying this around for 27 years? I had to. My mother made me promise never to tell anyone. Your mother's been dead for 3 years. The promise died with her. Harriet was a lawyer, practical and sharp, and she saw immediately what I was only beginning to understand. This changes everything, doesn't it? I think it might, I said. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I'm not going to pretend he doesn't exist. I'm not going to hide him or be ashamed of him. I've wasted enough years being ashamed. Harriet reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Good. You should never have had to carry this alone. That evening, I told Sophie first. She was home from college for the weekend, and we were sitting in her room while she packed for her return to school. Mom, are you serious? She stared at me in shock. I have a brother? A half-brother. Yes. And you never told us? I couldn't. Your grandmother made me promise. And then, I don't know. The longer I kept it secret, the harder it became to tell. Sophie was quiet for a long moment, processing. Finally, she said, I want to meet him. Really? Of course. He's my brother. Does Marcus know? Not yet. I wanted to tell you first. What about Dad? That was the question I'd been dreading. I don't know how to tell him. We're not in a good place right now. Sophie looked at me with eyes that were older than her 19 years. You mean because of last night? You noticed? Mom, everyone noticed. Dad was being a complete ass. I was embarrassed for you. Then why did you laugh? She had the grace to look ashamed. I don't know. Everyone else was laughing, and I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you. It's okay. I should have stood up for myself. So stand up now. Tell Dad about Eli. See what he does. But Philip found out before I could tell him. Margaret, my sister, had apparently seen Eli leaving my mother's house and recognized the resemblance to Thomas Whitmore. She'd called Philip immediately. I came home from grocery shopping to find him waiting in the living room, his face thunderous. We need to talk, he said. Okay. Margaret called. She said she saw you with Thomas Whitmore's son. I set down the groceries and faced him. His name is Eli. And yes, you're right. He's Thomas's son. And he's my son too. Philip's face went white, then red. What the hell does that mean? It means exactly what you think it means. I had a baby when I was 17. I gave him up for adoption. He found me. You had a baby? Philip's voice was deadly quiet. You had a baby with that piece of trash, and you never told me. I never told anyone. My mother made me promise. I don't give a damn what your mother made you promise. He was shouting now. You've been lying to me for 15 years. I haven't been lying. I couldn't talk about it. Couldn't talk about it? Jesus Christ. Isabel, you had a child with another man and you couldn't talk about it? I was 17. Philip, I was a child myself. That's not the point. The point is, you've been keeping this massive secret from me our entire marriage. What else haven't you told me? What other little surprises are going to show up on my doorstep? I felt that familiar urge to apologize, to smooth things over, to make myself smaller so he'd stop being angry. But then I thought about Eli, about the way he'd looked at me with such hope and love, and I found my backbone. I'm not apologizing for this, I said quietly. I'm not apologizing for having a son or for being glad he found me. I've spent 27 years regretting giving him up, and I'm not going to regret having him back. Having him back? Philip's voice was incredulous. What the hell does that mean? It means he's my son. It means I want him in my life. It means I want him to know his siblings and to be part of this family. Like hell. I'm not having that bastard around my children. The word hit me like a slap. Don't you dare call him that. That's what he is, isn't it? Your bastard child with some loser who probably died in a gutter somewhere. Something snapped inside me. Maybe it was the wine from the night before, or the lack of sleep, or just 27 years of buried grief finally finding its voice. But I looked at my husband, this man who'd spent years grinding down my self-worth, who'd humiliated me in front of everyone we knew, who was now attacking my son. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Rage. Pure. Clean. Rage. Get out, I said. What? Get out of this house, now. This is my house too. Get out, I was screaming now, really screaming, and it felt good. Get out, get out, get out. Philip stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But for the first time in years, I felt completely, utterly alive. You're hysterical, he said. We'll talk about this when you've calmed down. I am calm. I've never been calmer in my life. And I'm telling you to get out of my sight before I do something we'll both regret. He left, finally, but not before making it clear this wasn't over. He'd be back. And when he came back, we'd discuss my options. As if Eli was something I could choose to return. Like a sweater that didn't fit. I called Eli that night and asked if he wanted to have dinner the next day. He said yes, and I invited Sophie too. The three of us met at a little Italian place downtown. And it was awkward at first. How do you make small talk with the son you gave up and the daughter who just found out she has a brother? But Eli was easy to talk to, and Sophie was curious and kind, and by the end of the meal we were laughing together like we'd known each other for years. Eli told us about his students, about the funny things they said and did. Sophie told him about college, about her major in social work, about her boyfriend who was studying to be a veterinarian. You want to help people, Eli said to her. That's wonderful. I get it from Mom, Sophie said, glancing at me. She's always been the one who takes care of everyone else. Even when no one takes care of her, I said without thinking. There was a moment of uncomfortable silence. Then Eli reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Someone should, he said simply. Someone should take care of you. I started crying right there in the restaurant. Not the quiet, dignified tears I'd learned to cry, but huge, ugly sobs that made the other diners stare. Sophie moved to sit beside me, and Eli came around the table, and they held me while I cried out years of loneliness and disappointment and grief. I'm sorry, I kept saying. I'm so sorry. For what? Eli asked. You have nothing to be sorry for. I gave you up. I let you go. You were 17. You did what you thought was best. And look how I turned out. I'm okay. I'm more than okay. I'm happy. But I missed everything. Your first steps, your first words, your birthdays, your graduations. You missed my childhood, he said gently. But you don't have to miss the rest of my life. If you want to be part of it, I want that too. We left the restaurant and walked through downtown Elmbrook, talking and laughing. Sophie asked Eli about his adoptive parents, and he told her stories about Rose and Michael, about family camping trips and birthday parties and Christmas mornings. I could see her relaxing, accepting him into her mental picture of family. What about Marcus? She asked. When are you going to tell him? Soon, I said. When I figure out how. Just tell him the truth, Eli said. Kids are more resilient than adults think. They can handle more than we give them credit for. He was right. When I told Marcus the next day, he was quiet for a long moment, then said, Cool. Can I meet him? That's it? Just cool? Marcus shrugged. I always wanted a brother. Sophie's okay, but she's a girl. Does he like sports? I don't know. Why don't you ask him? So I invited Eli over for dinner the following night. Marcus peppered him with questions about basketball and football and video games. Eli was patient and interested. And by the end of the evening, Marcus was talking about teaching him to skateboard. He's nice, Marcus said to me after Eli left. Why didn't you tell us about him before? It's complicated, sweetheart. Because of Dad? Partly. Marcus nodded wisely. Dad's been weird lately. Weirder than usual. I mean, what do you mean? Just angry all the time. Like he's mad at the world or something. Is that why you guys have been fighting? I hadn't realized the kids had noticed. We haven't been fighting, exactly. Mom. Marcus gave me a look that was far too mature for 17. I live here. I hear things. And I saw how he talked to you at the restaurant. That was messed up. Language. It was, though. You're not a joke, Mom. You're not someone people should laugh at. I hugged him then. This almost grown son who was still young enough to think his mother was worth defending. Thank you for saying that. I mean it. You're the best mom ever. And if Dad can't see that, then he's an idiot. That night, I lay in bed thinking about my children, all 3 of them now, and about the life I'd built and the life I was building. Philip hadn't come home, which was fine by me. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out what came next. I thought about the woman I'd been at 17, pregnant and scared and so in love with Thomas Whitmore that I'd thought I'd die without him. I thought about how my mother had convinced me I was ruining my life, that I was too young and too stupid to make my own decisions. Maybe she'd been right about some things. Maybe I had been too young to be a mother then. But I wasn't too young now. I wasn't too stupid now. And I wasn't going to let anyone, not Philip, not my dead mother, not society, tell me what I could and couldn't do with my life. The next few days passed in a strange sort of peace. Philip was staying at his office, or maybe with his business partner James. The kids and I ate dinner together, watched movies, talked about normal things. Eli called every day. And slowly we began to build something that felt like a relationship. He brought me pictures of his adoptive parents, his childhood home, his classroom. I showed him photos of Sophie and Marcus's babies, told him stories about their milestones and achievements. We were trying to bridge 27 years of separation. And it was working. I wish I could have met your father, he said one evening. We were sitting in my mother's garden, which I'd been neglecting since she died. Thomas, my birth father. He was a good person, I said. Young and foolish, like me, but good. He had dreams of being a writer. He used to write me poems. What happened to him? I don't know. After I found out I was pregnant, my mother forbade me from seeing him. She said he was a bad influence, that he'd ruin my life. I was too scared to disobey her. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed together? I considered the question. Sometimes. But I think we were too young. We probably would have made a mess of it, and you might not have had the stable childhood you deserved. Maybe. Or maybe you would have figured it out together. Maybe you would have been happy. Maybe. But then I wouldn't have had Sophie and Marcus, and despite everything, I can't regret having them. Despite everything? I hesitated, then decided to be honest. My marriage hasn't been ideal. Especially lately. Because of me? No. Because of him. Because somewhere along the way, I forgot who I was. I let him make me smaller and smaller until I almost disappeared. But you're not small now, Eli said. You're not disappearing now. No, I agreed. I'm not. A week later, Philip came home. I was in the kitchen making dinner when I heard his key in the lock. My whole body tensed, but I forced myself to keep stirring the sauce. We need to talk, he said from the doorway. Okay. I've been thinking about this situation, about your son. I turned to face him. His name is Eli. Fine. Eli, I've been thinking. And I'm willing to accommodate this. But there have to be boundaries. Such as? He can't come around the house when I'm here. He can't meet my business associates. And he absolutely cannot meet my parents. Your parents? They don't need to know about this. It would kill my mother to know you had a child with someone else before me. I stared at him. You want me to hide him. I want you to be discreet. There's a difference. No, there isn't. You want me to be ashamed of him. You want me to treat him like a dirty secret. I want you to be realistic about what this means for our family. For our reputation. Our reputation? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Philip, I don't care about our reputation. I care about my son. He's not. Philip stopped himself, but I knew what he'd been about to say. He's not what? Not your son? You're right. He's better than that. Philip's face darkened. Be very careful, Isabel. You're walking a dangerous line. Am I? What are you going to do, Philip? Divorce me? Take the kids? Go ahead. I'm not afraid of you anymore. You should be. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Neither do you. I said quietly. Neither do you. He left again, and I finished making dinner. When the kids came home, I told them their father was working late. It was becoming a familiar refrain. That weekend, I took Eli to visit my mother's grave. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to show him where he came from. Or maybe I needed to tell my mother, somehow, that her grandson was here and he was wonderful. We stood in the cemetery, looking at the simple headstone that read, Margaret Hayes, beloved mother and grandmother. I told Eli about her, about how she'd raised me alone after my father left, about how she'd tried to protect me from making what she saw as a terrible mistake. She was wrong, Eli said simply. I wasn't a mistake. No. I agreed. You weren't? You were never a mistake. We put flowers on the grave, daisies, because they were her favorite, and I felt something settle in my chest, a kind of peace I hadn't expected. I want to introduce you to some people, I said as we walked back to the car. My friend Harriet, maybe some of the neighbors. I want people to know you're my son. Are you sure? Your husband seemed pretty clear about keeping this quiet. My husband doesn't get to decide who I love or who I claim as family. That's my choice. And you choose me? I choose you. I've always chosen you. I just didn't know how to fight for you before. And now you do? Now I do. The next week, I hosted a small dinner party. Nothing fancy, just Harriet and her husband, my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, and a few other friends. I introduced Eli as my son. And if people were surprised, they were polite enough not to show it. Eli was charming and funny, telling stories about his students and asking thoughtful questions about everyone's lives. I watched him work the room with easy confidence, and I felt a pride so fierce it almost took my breath away. He's lovely, Harriet whispered to me in the kitchen. He has your eyes. He has his father's everything else, I said. But yes, he's lovely. How's Philip handling all this? He's not. He's barely speaking to me. Maybe that's for the best. I looked at her in surprise. What do you mean? I mean, maybe this is your chance to figure out what you want, who you want to be. You've been so busy trying to be what Philip wanted that you forgot about yourself. I'm 44 years old, Harriet. It's a little late for self-discovery. Says who? You have years ahead of you. Decades. Maybe. Do you want to spend them all trying to please a man who doesn't appreciate you? I didn't answer, but I thought about her words all night. Was she right? Was this my chance to start over, to become someone I actually liked? The answer came sooner than I expected. The next Friday, I was having coffee with Eli at a little cafe downtown when Philip walked in with a woman I didn't recognize. She was younger than me, prettier, with the kind of polished look that comes from expensive salons and personal trainers. They didn't see us at first. I watched Philip pull out her chair, lean in to whisper something that made her laugh. The way he looked at her, it was the way he'd looked at me once. A long time ago. Mom? Eli's voice was concerned. Are you okay? That's my husband, I said quietly. With someone who is not his wife. Eli followed my gaze and took in the scene. Oh, I'm sorry. Don't be. I think this might be exactly what I needed to see. Philip spotted us then, His face went white, then red. He said something to the woman, who looked over at us with curious eyes. Then he stood up and walked over to our table. Isabel, what are you doing here? Having coffee with my son. What are you doing here? Business meeting. Is that what we're calling it now? Philip's jaw tightened. We should discuss this at home. No, I don't think so. I think we should discuss this right here, right now, in front of my son, who you've been so concerned about our family's reputation in front of. You're making a scene. Good. I've spent too many years not making scenes. Maybe it's time I started. Philip glanced around the cafe, aware that people were starting to stare. We'll talk about this later. Will we? Because it seems like you've been pretty busy talking to other people. He left without another word, and his companion followed, casting curious glances back at us. I watched them go, and I felt nothing. No pain, no anger, no betrayal, just a kind of empty relief. Are you okay? Eli asked again. I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I'm free. Free? Free to stop pretending. Free to stop trying to save a marriage that's been dead for years. Free to stop being someone I'm not. I called Harriet that night and told her about the cafe incident. She wasn't surprised. I've been waiting for you to figure this out, she said. Philip's been having lunch with that woman for months. Her name is Jessica something or other. She works at the bank. You knew? I suspected, but it wasn't my place to say anything unless you asked. I'm asking now. What do you know? Not much, just that they've been seen together. A lot. And not in ways that suggest business meetings. I hung up feeling strangely calm. The marriage was over, had been over for years. Really. This just made it official. Now I had to decide what came next. I spent the weekend thinking, planning, preparing. I met with Harriet in her capacity as a lawyer and discussed my options. I opened my own bank account and transferred half our savings. I made copies of important documents. I did all the practical things you do when your life is about to change completely. On Monday morning, I rented a small house across town. It was nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen with yellow walls that needed repainting. But it had good light and a small garden. And when I stood in the empty living room, I could picture myself being happy there. I told the kids that night. Sophie took it better than I expected. I'm not surprised, she said. You guys have been miserable for years. Marcus was quieter, more thoughtful. Are you getting divorced? Probably. Will we still live here? You can live wherever you want. With me, with your father, back and forth between us. Whatever feels right. What about Eli? What about him? Will he still be our brother if you and Dad get divorced? The question caught me off guard. Of course. That doesn't change. Good. Marcus said. I like having a brother. Philip came home Tuesday evening to find me packing boxes in the bedroom. He stood in the doorway watching for a long moment before speaking. What are you doing? What does it look like I'm doing? Where are you going? I rented a house. I'm moving out. We need to talk about this. No, we don't. There's nothing left to talk about. Isabel. Be reasonable. We can work this out. I stopped packing and looked at him. Really looked at him. When had he gotten so gray? When had the lines around his eyes deepened into permanent fixtures? When had I stopped seeing him as the man I fell in love with and started seeing him as an opponent to be endured? Philip, when was the last time you told me you loved me? He blinked, caught off guard. What kind of question is that? A simple one. When was the last time you told me you loved me and meant it? I tell you I love you all the time. When you want something. When you're trying to smooth over an argument. When we're in public and people expect to hear it. But when was the last time you said it just because you felt it? He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know what you want me to say. Nothing. I don't want you to say anything. That's the point. I went back to packing. He watched for a few more minutes, then left. I heard him on the phone in his office, probably talking to Jessica, probably telling her I was being dramatic and unreasonable. Maybe I was. But for the first time in years, I was being dramatic and unreasonable for myself instead of against myself. I moved into the little yellow house on Thursday. Eli helped me carry boxes, and Sophie came over after her classes to help me unpack. We worked in companionable silence, turning the empty space into something that felt like home. "This is nice," Sophie said, hanging curtains in the living room. "It feels like you." "What does that mean?" "I don't know. Peaceful. Honest. Like you don't have to pretend to be anything other than what you are." That night, I made dinner in my new kitchen, just pasta with marinara sauce, nothing fancy, and ate it at the small table by the window. I could see the garden from there, overgrown and neglected, but full of potential. I made a mental note to buy seeds. The phone rang just as I was finishing the dishes. It was Marcus. "Mom, Dad's acting weird." "Weird how?" "He keeps asking where you are and when you're coming home." I told him you moved out, but he doesn't seem to get it. He's making dinner for 2 people. My heart broke a little for Philip, but not enough to change my mind. "Do you want to come stay with me tonight? There's a spare bedroom." "Can I?" I brought homework. "Of course." Marcus showed up 20 minutes later with a backpack and his skateboard. We sat at the kitchen table while he did algebra, and I read a manuscript I was editing for work. It was domestic and ordinary and perfect. "Mom," Marcus said without looking up from his math, "I'm proud of you." "For what?" "For being brave. For not letting Dad treat you like crap anymore." "Language." "For not letting Dad treat you poorly anymore." I smiled and ruffled his hair. "Thank you, sweetheart." The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm. Sophie and Marcus came to stay with me on weekends. Eli came for dinner twice a week. I worked on my freelance projects during the day and painted the yellow kitchen walls white in the evenings. Slowly, the little house began to feel like mine. Philip called occasionally, trying to convince me to come home, to work things out, to think about what I was doing to our family. I listened politely and then hung up. There was nothing to work out. We were already worked out. I didn't hear from him for a week. And then one Friday night, he showed up at my door. I was in the garden, planting tomatoes in pots, when I heard the car pull up. When I looked up and saw him getting out of his BMW. My first instinct was to run inside and lock the door. Instead, I stayed where I was and kept planting. "Isabel." "Philip, we need to talk." "No, we really don't." "Yes, we do. This has gone on long enough. You've made your point." I sat back on my heels and looked at him. "My point? You're angry about Jessica. I get it, but it doesn't have to mean anything. She's nobody. A distraction." "A distraction from what?" From us. From our problems. From the fact that you've been lying to me about having a son." I stood up and brushed the dirt off my knees. "Philip, I want you to listen to me very carefully. This isn't about Jessica. This isn't about Eli. This is about the fact that you don't love me, and I don't love you. And we've both been pretending otherwise for years. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you were happy to see me? When was the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about logistics or problems or what the kids needed? When was the last time you looked at me and felt anything other than mild irritation?" He was quiet, which was answer enough. "I've been thinking," I continued, "about that toast you made at our anniversary dinner, about how you called me a challenge, how you made jokes about enduring me. That's how you see me, isn't it? As something to be endured?" I was trying to be funny. "No, you were telling the truth. For once in our marriage, you were completely honest about how you feel about me. And you know what? I'm grateful. Because it helped me realize how I feel about you. Which is nothing. I feel nothing. No love, no hate, no anger, just nothing. And that's worse than hating you, isn't it? At least hate is passionate. At least hate means something." Philip's face crumpled a little. So that's it? 15 years, and you just walk away? I'm not walking away from 15 years. I'm walking toward the rest of my life. What about the kids? The kids will be fine. They're smart, resilient, adaptable. They'll figure out how to love us both separately instead of watching us destroy each other together. And your son? Eli is part of my life now. If you can't accept that, that's your choice. But I'm not giving him up again. Not for you, not for anyone. Philip stood there for a long moment, looking lost and older than his years. Finally, he said, I suppose you want me to file for divorce. I already did. His head snapped up. What? I filed papers yesterday. Irreconcilable differences. No contest. I don't want your money. Philip, I don't want the house or the cars or any of it. I just want out. Jesus, Isabel. You could have talked to me about this. I tried, for years. You weren't listening. He left after that, and I went back to my tomatoes. My hands were shaking a little, but it was relief, not fear. It was over. Really, truly over. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Philip kept the house and most of our assets. I kept my freedom and my self-respect. It seemed like a fair trade. I threw a small party to celebrate, not the divorce, but the beginning of whatever came next. Eli brought wine. Sophie brought flowers. Marcus brought his girlfriend, a sweet girl named Amy who laughed at all his jokes. Harriet came with her husband, and Mrs. Peterson from next door brought homemade cookies. We sat in my little garden as the sun set, talking and laughing and planning trips we wanted to take. Eli told us about his idea to write a book about finding his birth family. Sophie talked about her summer internship at a women's shelter. Marcus showed off his latest skateboard tricks. You look happy, Harriet said to me as we cleaned up the dishes. I am happy. For the first time in years, I'm genuinely, completely happy. Any regrets? I thought about it. Just one. I wish I'd done this sooner. As everyone was leaving, Eli hung back to help me finish cleaning up. Thank you, he said as we put away the last of the glasses. For what? For finding yourself again. For becoming someone I can be proud to call my mother. I hugged him tight. This son I'd lost and found again. This young man who'd given me back pieces of myself I'd forgotten existed. Thank you, I said, for giving me a reason to fight. You always had reasons to fight. You just needed to remember what they were. He was right. I'd had reasons all along, my children, my work, my own worth as a human being. I'd just forgotten how to see them past the fog of a marriage that was slowly suffocating me. That night, I sat in my garden under the stars and thought about the woman I'd been at 17, pregnant and terrified, but still dreaming of a future that included love and family and purpose. I thought about the woman I'd become at 30, then 40, gradually shrinking and dimming until I was barely visible even to myself. And I thought about the woman I was now, at 44, finally beginning to understand that it's never too late to start over. Never too late to remember who you are underneath all the roles you play and masks you wear. Never too late to choose yourself. 3 weeks later, I was working in my garden when a car pulled up. For a moment, my heart clenched, thinking it might be Philip coming to start another argument about custody or money or lawyers. But when the car door opened, it was Eli, who got out. Hey, he called, walking toward me with that easy smile I was learning to love. I brought someone I'd like you to meet. A woman emerged from the passenger seat, petite, dark-haired, with kind eyes and an uncertain smile. She hung back while Eli approached, clearly nervous. This is Maria, Eli said. She's my girlfriend. We've been together for 2 years, and I finally worked up the courage to introduce her to my family. I stood up, pulling off my gardening gloves, and walked toward them. Maria's eyes widened slightly as I approached. She was probably expecting someone different, someone more like the woman Philip had made me believe I was. Maria, I said, extending my hand. I'm so happy to meet you. Eli's told me wonderful things about you. She shook my hand, her grip firm and warm. He's told me wonderful things about you too. I have to say, I was nervous about meeting you. Why? Because you're so important to him. Finding you, building a relationship with you, it's changed his whole life. He talks about you all the time. I glanced at Eli, who was blushing slightly. Good things, I hope. The best things, Maria said. He says you're the strongest person he knows. I'm learning to be, I said. Come in, both of you. I'll make coffee. We spent the afternoon on my small patio, talking easily about everything and nothing. Maria was a nurse at the children's hospital, and she lit up when she talked about her work. She and Eli had met when he'd brought one of his students to the emergency room after a playground accident. He was so worried about this little boy, Maria said, reaching over to squeeze Eli's hand. He stayed with him the whole time, even called the boy's parents and explained what happened. That's when I knew he was special. He gets that from his father, I said without thinking, then caught myself. His adoptive father, Michael. Eli's told me he was a wonderful man. He was, Eli agreed. But I think I get some things from you too. The way you've handled everything with Philip, the divorce, starting over, that took real courage. Or real stubbornness. Same thing, sometimes. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself watching Maria and Eli together, seeing the easy affection between them, the way they finished each other's sentences and laughed at each other's jokes. It reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. What it looked like when two people actually liked each other, not just loved each other out of habit or obligation. Are you two thinking about getting married? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Maria blushed, and Eli grinned. We've talked about it, he said. Maybe next year, when we're both more settled in our careers. I'd like that, I said. I'd like to have a daughter-in-law. I'd like to help plan a wedding. Really? Maria's face lit up. Because I don't have much family. And I've always dreamed of having a mother-in-law who actually liked me. I more than like you, I said truthfully. I can see how happy you make him. That's all I've ever wanted for any of my children. For them to be happy. They left as the sun was setting, promising to come back the following week for dinner. I watched their car disappear down the street and felt a contentment so deep it was almost physical. This was what I'd been missing for so many years, this sense of family that was chosen rather than endured, built on love rather than obligation. The next morning, I was having coffee on my patio when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Philip's number, and I almost didn't answer. We'd been getting along better since the divorce was finalized, communicating mostly through text about the kids' schedules and school events. But something made me pick up. Isabel, it's Philip. I know. What's up? I wanted to ask you something. About Eli. I tensed, waiting for another argument about keeping him away from Sophie and Marcus. What about him? Marcus mentioned that he might be getting married. To his girlfriend. They're thinking about it. Why? There was a long pause. I was wondering. Do you think he'd want me to walk him down the aisle? Since his adoptive father is dead? I know it's not traditional, and I know we got off on the wrong foot, but I nearly dropped the phone. Philip, are you serious? I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about family, about what matters, and I realize I was wrong about him, about a lot of things. What changed your mind? Another pause. Sophie, actually. She invited me to lunch last week, and she spent the whole time talking about Eli, about what a good person he is, how much he loves you, how happy he makes Marcus feel to have a big brother. And I realized I was being an ass. Language, I said automatically, then caught myself. Sorry. Old habit? No, you're right to call me on it. I was being an ass. I was jealous and petty and cruel, and I took it out on a kid who never did anything wrong except exist. I sat down hard on my patio chair. Philip, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking if you think he'd be open to getting to know me. As Sophie and Marcus's father, if nothing else. I think, I said slowly, that Eli has a very big heart. And I think if you approached him with genuine remorse and genuine interest in being part of his life, he might be willing to listen. Would you be willing to facilitate that? Maybe invite me to dinner when he's there. I thought about it. 6 months ago, the idea of Philip and Eli in the same room would have terrified me. But I wasn't the same woman I'd been 6 months ago. And apparently Philip wasn't quite the same man either. I can ask him, I said. But if he says no, you have to respect that. Of course. And Isabel? Thank you for giving me a chance to do the right thing. After I hung up, I sat in my garden for a long time, thinking about forgiveness and second chances and the strange ways families can reshape themselves. I thought about the woman who'd sat in her mother's kitchen just a year ago, drowning in cheap wine and self-pity. And I marveled at how much could change in such a short time. That evening, I called Eli and told him about Philip's request. He was quiet for a long moment. What do you think? He asked finally. I think people can change, sometimes, if they really want to. And I think your siblings would be happy to see their father and their brother getting along. And you? How would you feel about it? Honestly, I'd be proud of you for being the bigger person. But if you're not ready, if it's too much to ask, no one will blame you. Let me think about it, he said. And maybe talk to Maria. She's good at helping me figure out what I really want. That's what good partners do, I said. They help you see yourself clearly. A week later, Eli called me back. Okay, he said. I'll meet with him. But I want you there, and I want it to be somewhere neutral. Not your house, not his house. How about that little cafe downtown, the one where we were when I saw him with Jessica? Perfect. Full circle. We arranged to meet on a Saturday afternoon. I got there early and chose a table near the window, where I could see Philip and Eli approaching from different directions. I was nervous. More nervous than I'd expected to be. What if this went badly? What if they ended up shouting at each other? What if I'd made a terrible mistake? But then I saw Eli walking up the sidewalk, his hands in his pockets, his expression calm and open. And a few minutes later, Philip appeared from the opposite direction, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. When they reached the cafe door at the same time, they both hesitated. Then Eli held the door open for Philip. They spotted me and walked over together. Not talking, but not actively avoiding each other either. I stood up as they approached. Philip, this is Eli, I said, feeling strange about making this introduction so many months after it should have happened. Eli, this is Philip. They shook hands, and I saw Philip's face change slightly as he got his first close look at Eli. I knew what he was seeing. The resemblance to Thomas was unmistakable, but there was something else there too. A kindness in Eli's eyes, a steadiness that was all his own. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, Philip said as we all sat down. I know I haven't given you any reason to trust me. You're Sophie and Marcus's father, Eli said simply. That's reason enough. We ordered coffee and pastries, making small talk about the weather and the cafe's renovations. Finally, Philip cleared his throat. I owe you an apology, he said to Eli. A big one. The way I reacted when I found out about you, the things I said, there's no excuse for that. You were surprised, Eli said diplomatically. And probably feeling betrayed. I can understand that. No, it was more than that. I was jealous. I looked at Philip in surprise. This wasn't what I'd expected him to say. Jealous of what? Eli asked. Of your father, your birth father, Thomas. Philip's voice was quiet, almost ashamed. Isabel told me about him once, early in our relationship, about how much she'd loved him, how heartbroken she'd been when they had to break up. And I always wondered if she settled for me because she couldn't have him. I stared at Philip, speechless. In 15 years of marriage, he'd never said anything like this to me. When you showed up, Philip continued, you looked so much like him. And you were this reminder that she'd loved someone else first. Loved someone else enough to have his child. I felt like I'd been competing with a ghost all these years. And suddenly, the ghost was real. Eli was quiet for a moment, processing this. I'm not my father, he said finally. I'm not Thomas. I'm just a guy who wanted to find his birth mother and maybe understand where he came from. I know that now. But at the time, all I could see was everything I'd always been afraid of. That I wasn't enough. That I'd never be enough. Philip, I said softly, why didn't you ever tell me you felt that way? He shrugged, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. Pride, I guess. Fear. If I admitted I was insecure about Thomas, it would have made it real. But it was already real. The insecurity was eating at you whether you talked about it or not. I know that now. Too late. But I know it. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of unspoken resentments and fears settling around us. Finally, Eli spoke. For what it's worth, he said, I don't think my mother settled for you. I think she loved you the way people love when they're older and wiser than 17. Maybe it was different from what she felt for my father. But that doesn't make it less real. Philip looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Vulnerability? Hope? Is that true? He asked. It was true, I said carefully. For a long time, it was true. We lost our way somewhere. Could we find it again? The question hung in the air between us. I saw Eli glance back and forth between us, clearly uncomfortable with being in the middle of this conversation. I don't know, I said honestly. I'm not the same person I was when we got married, and neither are you. Maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. I thought about it. The man sitting across from me was Philip, but he was also someone I didn't quite recognize. Someone who could admit to jealousy and fear. Someone who could apologize to a young man he'd treated cruelly. Someone who could ask hard questions and accept difficult answers. Maybe not, I said. But I'm happy now. Philip, for the first time in years, I'm genuinely happy with my life. I know, I can see it. You look lighter. I feel lighter. And I don't want to take that away from you. I want to be part of it somehow. Part of your life, part of the kids' lives, part of Eli's life, if he'll have me. Eli cleared his throat. I'd be willing to try, he said. For Sophie and Marcus's sake, at least, they love you, and they love me. And maybe we can figure out how to make that work. What would that look like? Philip asked. I don't know. Maybe we start with family dinners occasionally. See how it goes. I'd like that, Philip said. I'd like that a lot. We finished our coffee and made tentative plans for dinner the following week. As we were getting ready to leave, Philip turned to me one more time. Isabel, I know it's probably too late for us, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. For all of it. For making you feel small. For taking you for granted. For not seeing how amazing you are until you were gone. Thank you, I said. That means something. Does it mean enough? I looked at this man I'd spent 15 years with. This man who'd fathered 2 of my children and shared so many milestones and memories. There was love there still, but it was different now. Gentler, maybe. Less desperate. I don't know, I said honestly. But it's a start. The dinner the following week was awkward, but not terrible. Philip was on his best behavior, asking Eli thoughtful questions about his work and his childhood, sharing stories about Sophie and Marcus that made Eli laugh. Sophie and Marcus were delighted to see their father and brother getting along, and gradually the conversation began to feel more natural. This is weird, Marcus said at one point, but good weird, like we're a real family finally. We've always been a real family, I said. We're just a different shape now. A better shape, Sophie added, reaching over to squeeze Eli's hand. After dinner, Philip helped me clear the dishes while the kids went out to the garden to look at my tomato plants. Thank you, he said as we loaded the dishwasher. for giving me a chance to fix this. You're fixing it yourself. I'm just allowing it to be fixed. It's more than I deserve. Maybe, but it's what our children deserve. And maybe, eventually, it's what we deserve too. He paused in his dish rinsing and looked at me. Do you think we'll ever? I don't know. Philip, I really don't. Right now, I'm focused on learning how to be myself again, on building relationships with my children, all three of them, on figuring out what I want the rest of my life to look like. And there's no room in that picture for me. There's room for you as Sophie and Marcus's father, as part of our extended family. Beyond that, I shrugged. Time will tell. He nodded, accepting this with more grace than I'd expected. That's fair. More than fair. 2 months later, Eli and Maria got engaged. They called to tell me the news on a Tuesday evening, both of them breathless with excitement. We want to have the wedding next spring, Maria said. Something small and simple, maybe in that park by the lake. That sounds perfect, I said. How can I help? Well, Eli said, we were hoping you'd help plan it. And Philip asked if he could walk me down the aisle, if that's okay with you. I felt tears prick my eyes. More than okay, I think that would be wonderful. And we want Sophie to be the maid of honor, and Marcus to be the best man. We want it to be about family, all of us together. I can't think of anything better, I said. The wedding planning brought us all together in ways I hadn't expected. Philip and I worked surprisingly well as a team, coordinating vendors and managing details. Sophie threw herself into dress shopping and flower arrangements. Marcus took his best man duties very seriously, organizing a bachelor party that consisted of mini golf and burgers. And through it all, I watched my son, my found son, preparing to start his own family with a woman who loved him deeply and honestly. I watched him become the man I'd always hoped he'd become, even when I didn't know he existed. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my garden, looking up at the stars and thinking about all the paths that had led us to this moment. The choices made and unmade, the secrets kept and revealed, the family lost and found and reformed into something new and strange and beautiful. My phone buzzed with a text from Eli. Thank you for everything. I love you. Mom. I texted back. I love you too. Sleep well? Tomorrow's going to be perfect. And it was. The wedding was small and intimate, held in the park by the lake with just close friends and family. Maria looked radiant in a simple white dress, and Eli looked handsome and nervous and so happy it made my chest ache. When the officiant asked who gave this woman to be married, Philip stepped forward and said, Her family and I do, with joy and blessing. Then he turned to Eli and added, And who supports this man in his marriage? I do, I said, my voice clear and strong. We all do. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising to be partners and best friends, to support each other's dreams and comfort each other's fears. When they kissed, the whole gathering erupted in cheers and applause. At the reception, Philip made a toast that surprised everyone, including me. I want to thank Eli, he said, raising his glass, for teaching me what it really means to be part of a family, for showing me that love isn't about possession or control, but about acceptance and support, and for reminding me that it's never too late to become the person you want to be. He looked at me as he spoke, and I saw in his eyes the same man I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. Not the bitter, insecure man he'd become, but the hopeful, open-hearted man he'd once been. Later, as we were cleaning up, Eli pulled me aside. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small wrapped box and handed it to me. Inside was a locket, silver and delicate, with a photo inside, a picture of all 5 of us from that first family dinner, laughing around my kitchen table. I wanted you to have something to remember this by, he said. To remember that families aren't just born, they're made, and you made ours. I hugged him tight, this son who'd given me back so much more than I'd ever lost. Thank you, I whispered. for finding me, for saving me. You saved yourself, he said. I just gave you a reason to. As the evening wound down and the last guests were leaving, Philip approached me one more time. Would you like to have dinner sometime? He asked. Just the two of us. No kids, no wedding planning, no agenda, just dinner. I looked at him. This man who'd been my husband, my adversary, and now, maybe, my friend. The man who'd humiliated me at that anniversary dinner so many months ago, who'd frozen at the sight of my son, who'd learned to thaw and apologize and become someone better. I'd like that, I said. I'd like that very much. Really? Really? But Philip? I'm not the woman you married. I'm not going to go back to being her, no matter what happens between us. I know. And I'm not asking you to. I like who you are now. I like this version of you, strong and independent and sure of yourself. I just want to get to know her better. Then we'll start there, I said. We'll start with getting to know each other again. He smiled. And for the first time in years, it reached his eyes. I can't think of a better place to start. As I drove home that night, I thought about the woman who'd sat in her mother's kitchen a year ago, broken and lost, and convinced her life was over. I thought about the moment Eli had knocked on that door and changed everything. Not because he was some magical solution to my problems, but because he'd reminded me that I was worth fighting for. I thought about revenge, not the kind that destroys, but the kind that builds. The revenge of living well, of refusing to be diminished, of turning pain into purpose and secrets into strength. I parked in front of my little yellow house and sat for a moment, looking at the garden I'd planted, the life I'd built, the future that stretched ahead of me like an empty page waiting to be written. Tomorrow I would call Philip about that dinner. Tomorrow I would start planning Eli and Maria's first anniversary celebration. Tomorrow I would continue the work of being myself, wholly and unapologetically myself. But tonight, I would sit in my garden and count my blessings. 3 children who loved me, friends who supported me, a former husband who was learning to see me clearly, and a son who'd traveled across time and distance to find me. Tonight, I would remember that some stories don't end with revenge. Some stories end with redemption. And some stories, the very best stories, end with the understanding that it's never too late to begin again.